With mature and savvy internet populations, the Nordic countries have a great deal of potential for international businesses. Of course, understanding how these markets differ from each other, as well as other European countries, will increase the chance of success. And to talk about it, Jens Kuhn is here today. Hi Jens.
Hello.
Thank you very much for being with us.
My pleasure.
First of all, you're German, you live in the UK, but you're going to talk about Scandinavia. Why that?
Well, I used to live in Sweden for basically more than half of my life.
Uh-huh.
So I've only been here 5 years, and I moved to Sweden when I was 19-ish.
Okay. So quite a
It's
while.
basically my second home.
Okay, after Germany or...
Yeah, well, that depends. If you ask my wife, this should be my home now. So
Okay.
if you ask my mum, it would
we'll
be.
skip
Yeah.
that question then. In terms of how does it differ for like Nordic countries to the rest of Europe in terms of internet behavior, I would say?
Well, the Nordic countries always have been quite early adopters when it comes to technology, and internet penetration is very high.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Europe has been caught up quite all right, but people are used to having stuff on the internet and using it widely.
Okay. And are there any differences between, let's say, Denmark and Sweden and Norway and Iceland?
Well, if we leave Iceland out for now, but Iceland used to be quite very high up on the scale for internet related things, but they had a bit of a financial crash a while ago, and a lot of businesses have not really survived that. But if we take the other three countries, without trying to offend the Danish and Norwegian population, I would say Sweden is a little bit different in a way that the Swedish government has had quite an intensive campaign to build or finance the build out of broadband internet.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people just have very fast internet at home, more or less free of charge, and included in the rent or similar schemes. When I still lived there, we used to joke about there was quite a lot of my friends that had a lot faster internet, or 10 times faster internet in their living rooms than we had at work.
Okay.
Because it was just that time when they had all rolled out these fiber networks.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I would say Sweden is probably a little bit more organized, large-scale internet build-out friendly due to those early schemes they had.
So in terms of the language now, because Swedish, Norwegian and Danish are from the same family, and Icelandic as well by extension, is there any key consideration to take when you optimize for SEO, for example?
Well, they are all very similar languages, and people understand each other and can easily read written text in the other languages. There are some subtle differences, though, one should be aware of, particularly when doing keyword research.
Mm-hmm.
Both Danish and Norwegian people tend to use or incorporate English words into their languages to a higher degree than Swedish people. Mm-hmm. That has partly to do with the Swedish grammar, which is slightly different. Not that we would notice a lot, but it's different enough for Swedish people to prefer to make their own words, even if they come from sometimes they can use English verbs and change endings and make them Swedish. But the ways plurals are constructed in nouns, it's easier for Danish and Norwegian people to smoothly incorporate them into their written and spoken language than for Swedish people. But that said, even Swedish people use a lot of English when they're online, obviously. But yeah, Swedish tends to have more words of their own. Icelandic obviously has only words of their own, basically.
Okay.
The Icelandic language encourages its people to stay pure, to a much higher degree even than you do in France.
They are the French of Scandinavia.
They are the French of the Scandinavian
Wow.
language area, we can say, yeah.
What about Finnish then?
Finnish has nothing to do with the Scandinavian languages altogether. A lot of people think that while Finland is part of the Nordic countries, as they call themselves, it is, however, not part of Scandinavia, and the language is not a Scandinavian language. It doesn't have the same roots. There are a few words in the Finnish language which are of Swedish origin, and vice versa, actually, because Sweden and Finland was part of Sweden until the early 19th century. But the language itself is completely different.
And Swedish is an official language in Finland.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And we always say, especially like European people would say, Scandinavian people can speak such good English. Is it true? I mean, I guess it is. But in that case, can we just keep a website in English and it would be all right to launch it into those countries and everything will be all right? Or what's your...
Well, firstly, yeah, I think it's probably true, but I think it's probably equally true of, for example, Dutch people. And to defend my own people, the Germans are actually catching up nicely on that front. But the thing is partly to do with that the Nordic countries are small countries and their languages are not really spoken anywhere else. So people are encouraged and they need English whenever they travel. So these countries have always encouraged learning of English in a very early stage in schools, much earlier than you would start to learn a foreign language in Germany or France, I suppose, traditionally. Even though I know that in Germany now they do English much earlier as well. But there's another key difference, and that's definitely to the German disadvantage, and I would say the French as well, and that's television. Because the countries being so small, most of the stuff that's shown on television is of American origin, or BBC as well, British origin, but mostly it's American.
Yeah.
And it's not dubbed or synchronized, it's always subtitled. So Swedish people are from early childhood used to hearing English and seeing the translation text on the screen. So there's no better way than picking up vocabulary than that. And yes, obviously you can target Scandinavian countries probably with English web pages for a lot of purposes. There are obviously reasons why you would not do it, partly because if you have the same product and you've got one company that offers it and only has an English page, and you have another company who offers the same product and has a local page, people will tend to prefer the page that might at least make the effort to have a local page. Well, obviously, it's still that what you do. And when you search for particularly consumer products, you would start searching in your own language. Only if you don't find something, you switch to English. Okay. It might be slightly different in business-to-business related things and services where people use English at work more or less anyway.
So people search in English as well, because that's something I've come across before, is that keyword research for Sweden, for example, with English keywords in there and Swedish keywords in there. But is it because the English keywords are part of the Swedish vocabulary, or is it because people are actually searching in English as well?
That depends on the product. In certain industries, the English keywords are predominant. Even more so in Denmark and Norway. Areas like IT or particularly like more complex IT services. For consumer products, I would say you wouldn't search in English until you have tried your own language and can't find what you want. Because sometimes you might not be able to actually find the product locally. But you would then also be prepared to buy it from abroad. When I lived in Sweden, I bought a lot of books from Amazon, which didn't exist in Sweden at all. They didn't have a Swedish page. But I didn't buy Swedish books there. So I would have bought them from a Swedish site. So, yeah.
Okay. And so when you conduct a keyword research for those languages or for those markets, in that case, what do you need to take into consideration? Obviously, some English keywords maybe you can include in the keyword research. But apart from that, in terms of language?
Well, there is one main consideration, and that is the fact that the markets are so small. So unless it's a product which is really popular, widely used consumer products, keyword researchers for those countries quite often run out of search volume. I'm not really sure if that's due to the fact that people don't search for it at all. I'm rather suspecting that there is not enough data for the tools like Google Keyword Planner to take it into consideration, because the search volume is consistent but low. And that obviously doesn't mean you can't target those keywords, because people still use them. And there are some language-specific things to think of, like compound nouns, words written together, which people tend to search for apart as well. But I think it's mainly the overall lower amount of data to look at, which makes it more difficult to do research for those countries.
And when you want to optimize or when you want to run a campaign for SEO, for PPC, for example, what other elements you would take into consideration? Like, for example, could be best practice for SEO. Let's say you need to put the keyword at the beginning, but does it work when you create a sentence in Swedish or in Norwegian? Or when you create an ad in Norwegian or in Swedish, what is it easy to put a call to action? I don't know, these kind of things.
Well,
on top of your head, obviously.
Yeah, these languages do not grammatically differ largely from languages like English, Dutch, or German. It's not a big problem putting the keywords in the right places normally.
Well,
you might get
Germany
match type
languages
issues.
anyways.
Yeah, you might get match type issues that keywords will have need endings, and some Swedish plurals, for example, change letters within the word, instead of just putting
kind of
something at the end, which Norway and Denmark don't do. So Icelandic, however, would be doing this even worse. But overall, I don't think that's a particular challenge. Not call to actions and things like that either. It's you could discuss your favorite topic about whether call to actions are actually the right thing to use for those markets, but I haven't personally done any research in that field.
And in terms of e-commerce, are they big players? Do they buy online? Don't they?
They do buy online lots of things. I mean, like, not particularly, and usually more than other European countries, I would say. I haven't seen any statistics, but from my own experience, but then I am one who buy basically everything online, so I'm probably not the right person to say. There is some particularities which make it both easier and harder to buy certain things online. In Sweden, for example, parcels are not delivered to the door by the normal postal service unless you have particular couriers. They will have to be collected from the post office, which is both an advantage and a disadvantage. Actually, the advantage is that a lot of Swedish households are not at home during the day because both parts work. So for those people, this is actually an advantage because they just pick it up on the way from work. It does, however, affect delivery times. So things like overnight deliveries rarely work unless you use special delivery companies, because it would arrive at the post office the day after, but then the postman will put a note through the letterbox that you have something to collect. And by the time you get back from work, obviously the post office be shut, so you have to go the day after. So if you want something quick, it might not be the best solution. But that is said, if you target those markets with e-commerce products where we actually have physical deliveries, it might be a good idea to think of premium delivery options where people can actually get it delivered at the time of their choice, for example, in the evenings as well, or to an address of their choice, like work or something like that. So the normal postal service wouldn't do evening deliveries or something like that, or weekend even. There's no post on Saturdays in Sweden, for example.
Okay. And in terms of payment options, do you have anything there?
Credit cards work like everywhere else. again, Sweden has a little specialty that there is still quite a lot of people prefer actually to get an invoice, particularly on the big Swedish book selling sites. That invoice option is quite popular because it just comes in the book, and then you get the little slip and you pay it normally through your online bank.
Okay.
But PayPal obviously works, and all these
it's kind
solutions.
of payment and delivery, more or less.
Yeah, you could say. Yeah.
So you want to check the.
But it's a security.
Products.
The security is we would think as a company it might be a bit of a risk sending books out and people might not pay. But the Swedish system is very much based. Is very well, say, bureaucratic and strict. So you've got this personal number, and if that's on the invoice and you don't pay it, then they are. Well, it's easy to chase up people up if they don't pay. So.
And what about social media? Is it really important in those countries for a brand, or can they do without?
I think it's just as equally important as in other markets. I wouldn't see why it would be more important than anywhere else. Obviously, Scandinavian people are savvy on internet and quite often like to try out new services that come up, like Twitter and when it was new, stuff like that. And they also have quite a big industry of developers of their own software. I mean, Spotify is a Swedish developed product. So yeah, but not more than anywhere else, I would say.
Okay, more or less the same behaviour as you would find in the UK in that case. Yeah.